Well, good morning, everybody. I can't believe those guys were talking about co-pilots and agents. That's what I was going to talk about. I mean, now I'm not sure what to do. But no, it's great to be here. And Ashish, thank you for the kind introduction. I will tell you that, this is not a commercial. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm here for the lunch. But we have used, and Arlene sitting in the back when we went from Perspecta, putting that together, and in Vencor, we've used Technomile for years and years. And it's always been a great product and great service, so congratulations on building a great company. So look, I've got a few minutes here, not probably 20 minutes, and we could take some questions, to talk about three things, and it's really just about, my lessons learned. So I'm not intended to be a lecturer, just kind of tell you, and as an advisor and a board member now, and no longer an operator or CEO, you have to kind of say, have you thought about, I've seen this before. So these are just lessons learned. And I hope for all of you, there's a pearl or two in there that you can use as you kind of go forward, building your career, whether it's in business development or contract management or an aspiring C-level executive. So again, it's not meant to be a lecture, just kind of talk about the things that I've seen, kind of in three areas. I think the first is leading in disruptive times. Secondly, kind of focus a little bit more on the GovCon market, and how to think about building organizations to grow. And then I spend a little bit of time, I'm getting the hook already. and then talk a little bit about M&A, because I've made every mistake you can possibly make. Some twice, and so if I can help you avoid making a mistake, then that's good for you. So look, I think leading during disruptive times, I think, I've been around a long time, and you go back and you think about disruptive times, and we're certainly in that now. But I think looking at where we started, 2000 dot-com bust, I was around for that. Then you had 9/11, and then you had the 2008 financial crisis, right? And then the advent of social media, how it impacts our daily lives, how it impacts our work life. All these lead to disruptive times, not including all the geopolitical issues, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Gaza, and all these things that just kind of burden us, not only as humans, as Americans, but also in the business world. Focusing on the business world, I think what I would tell you, what I've learned is you can't worry about what you can't control when it comes to the business side. I'm really focused on the business side. There's really not much you can do about it. What you have to be able to do, in my view, as a leader, is you have to drive the positivity in the organization, because as a leader, regardless of what organization you're running, as the leader, if you succumb to, there's this issue and that issue, and how are we going to do this and how are we going to do that, it's debilitating to the organization, particularly when you're the leader. So you can't control it. You have to drive positivity. And if your team sees you kind of bending to, it's so hard, I can't do this, they will take on exactly the same behavior that you exhibit. So the glass has to be, as the leader, has to be half full. Then you have to be able to find a way that you can continue to drive forward and move the business forward. Because without that, you just won't succeed. You'll just be burdened by negativity, and you can't tolerate it, because it really brings down the organization. So I want to give you just, if I may, 4 lessons learned from mentors that I've got. And I'll mention them by name. I hope you don't mind, because they were very important to helping build, what I would call a leadership style, right? And it's served me over the last 35 years with respect to, in particular, the last 15 to 16 being a CEO. And the first I mentioned, Bob LaRose, who was a local guy, was a CEO, probably one of the most underrated CEOs. He built 3 beautiful companies. One was Advanced Technology a long time ago that became part of PRC. And then he sold another business to Northrop Grumman, a healthcare software business. The last company he sold to Accenture. And one of the things I noticed as a young engineer in sitting in these reviews with Bob LaRose, his ability to motivate people. And if you had a plan that was $20 million, he'd look right at you and say, can't you do 24? What do you need to do 20? We really need you to do 24. I'm going to give you everything you need. How do you get to 24? And if you had 5 organizations that were at 20, he gets them all to 24, right? Now you're at 120 million. If he gets half of that, he's still at 110. He's got 10% growth. but his ability to motivate and build the team it was amazing to watch. The second was Russ Galati. He was a CEO of a public company that I worked for, that became Pearson, frankly. And it was about a $600 million company. And Russ is what his claim to fame, at least what I saw and what I learned, his ability to build the strategy. Here's what we do. Actually, here's what the business is. Here's the strategy. And here are the core values of how we operate. And everybody, I'll never forget, they were in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I'll never forget, I had probably 10 interviews over 3 days. Everybody said the same thing. We're in the education software business. We're in the data analytics business. Here's our strategy. And basically, here are the core values. Here's how we treat each other. Here's how we operate day in and day out. I thought that was fascinating. Paul Lombardi was the third mentor. And Paul's a local CEO. Worked for him for about 15 years, and then he became an advisor and a board member. And his claim to fame, what I took away from him, was to make sure everybody in the organization knew what their role was, whether it's in contracts management or business development or whatever it was. Here's what your role is. Here's how you're contributing to the success of the organization. And I thought that was very important. So I kind of put that in the back of my computer. And the fourth, and probably the most poignant, was Marjorie Scardino, who ran Pearson. And Pearson was a $7 or $8 billion publishing company. We were doing software. We were kind of we were a corporate orphan, actually. But I had the pleasure of reporting directly to her. And I asked her one day, I said, Margie, how do you know where to spend your time? You're an $8 billion company, $7 billion, you're traded in the exchange in London on New York Stock Exchange. How do you know where to do and what to do? And she said, well, outside the stuff I normally do, I focus on the biggest threat to the business. So, wow, what does that mean? Biggest threat to the business, it could be not being able to find the right salespeople. It could be we've got a software project that's behind. And I took that and I said, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Do what you have to do, but those things that you need to do. So I took those and put them in kind of the management style as I kind of grew up. And then I think the other thing that I learned is to be a keen observer of management styles. I learned as much what not to do in leading as what to do. And all I'll say about that is I've kind of learned the trick where, hey, look, it's all about doing the right thing with people, customers, partners, whatever it is. And you can't always do it, but if you endeavor to do that, I think it takes you a long way. Now, just 1 second here on kind of where we are and leading in disruptive times. I mean, 2 days ago, it's disruptive, regardless of which side you're on. Half of your workforce is thinking it's great, the other half feels disenfranchised, and it's a problem. As the leader, you have to deal with that. Not the politics. Right? That's not the CEO's job. The CEO's job, in my view, the leader's job, is to drive the business forward. Drive the business forward. And in our space, it's about the mission. You've got to deliver on the mission, whether it's software, whether it's in the intelligence community. And so all I would say about that is if you think about it, if I looked at it, if I were still running a company, you have to absorb the fear, right, when you think about it, and you have to exude hope. So you have this certain part of the disenfranchised population. It's not standing up and articulating political views one way or the other, but it's to say things are going to be okay, right? If you look at it, 2 years from now, there's a midterm election, right? And so you basically, you absorb the fear and say, here's how things are going to work. And there's always hope because we have a mission to live. You got to focus on the mission. So I think if I were doing that, it's that kind of thing where you have to be in touch with people and what concerns them. So that's a lot to throw at you. That's about 30 years of building a management and leadership style. I hope there's something in there that works, but I was always observing, seeing what would work for me. If ever were king of a rock pile, how would I do things? How would I lead things? And I think these are some of the things that I have taken along the way. Now, thinking about the GovCon market, right, and we're all in that. It's a huge market. It's probably $1.7 billion budget this year. $800 million in the defense, another, 700, 600, whatever it is, in the civilian market of where you all are applying your trade. It's a bit different. Huge budgets, incredible number of competitors. The sales cycle is tough. It's highly regulated. And so in addition to all the social economic challenges we face in our market, these are some of the additional challenges, right? And it's tough. And you've got, think about it, the FY25 funding. We haven't had, I find this amazing. I think there are 11 or 12, maybe 13 appropriation bills. I've forgotten. I'm glad to forget that. We've not had all the appropriation bills signed, well, I was told since 1996. So we've been on some form or fashion of a continuing resolution for almost 30 years. Now, again, it gets back to that positivity. If there's a will, there's a way. You have to operate in this market. If you're a public company, investors damn sure expect you to, right? If you're privately held, growth is good, right? And I mean, you think about it, it's either you're green or growing, or you're ripe or dying. I mean, that's kind of the old adage. So we have to deal with all these things, but there are always positive seams that we can find, right? The advent of IDIQs and the GWACs, right? There's also the advent of OTAs and small business innovation researches, phases 1 through 3. So if you focus and you drive, there are ways that you can get to your customer and you can deliver the goods that you need to deliver. I mean, look, the impact of what we do in this room and around this beltway is immeasurable to what we do for our citizens in this country. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's in the defense community, or whether it's in the intelligence community. So just a couple of things that, in addition to the leadership tenets, a couple of things that I'd like to talk about before we go transition to the M&A side of the house, about how to build, in my view, again, my experience of building a growth-focused organization. Look, and there's probably 4 or 5 things. One, take care of your employees. Now, I know that sounds a bit like a cliche, but it's really important because I think in our space, if you take care of the employees will take care of the mission. And on the other side of that equal sign is whatever it is you're after, whether it's a public company and you've got quarterly results you've got to deliver, private company, whatever it is. If you mix those variables in the equation up, it goes bad. You can't put, I've got to make money, right? And then on the other side, I'm going to take care of it. It doesn't work that way, at least in my view. At least in my view. As you build a company you're proud of, it just works. So you have to take care of your people. You have to take care of your people, and they'll take care of the mission. And you put those two together, on the other side, it's the success for what it is you're driving for. I think the other thing, and I've seen this and I was never a believer of it, is you have to build, I have you a management cadence. What's the predictability when you have pipeline reviews? It can't be 3 times a week. It can't be once a quarter. So I think as a leader, you have to put in that cadence so people know what to do, when they should do it, and how they should transmit that information, and what's the absolute action that's coming out of it. So I think that management cadence is important. What do I have to do on a monthly basis, weekly basis, daily basis? I think that's important because it becomes the routine. It's the discipline of running the business, I think is important. I think the other thing associated with that is also establishing in our space the mission of the business. Why do people come to work every day? And I wouldn't believe that for anything 20 years ago, but I think establishing the mission, why do people get up in the morning to come to work for your company? What's the strategy, where are we going, and what are the core values? How are we going to treat each other? Being respectful of each other, customers and partners, operating with integrity, expecting to be successful, empowering, whatever they may be, they're so important, and it works. When you line that up, you get like people together, and you can move a business forward. So again, I think establishing the mission, the strategy, the core values is absolutely critical. I think, again, as I talked about, the business cadence and the business structure to make sure you have accountability. And the last thing is you have to be manic, absolutely manic and disciplined about the pipeline, about growing the pipeline, right? Whether it's on-contract growth, whether it's task order generation, whatever it might be, you have to be, and that has to be something you do. People work every day, particularly in this time of being dispersed and not having a virtual relationship with the customer. You've got to build that pipeline, and people have to be accountable, and you've got the systems and the cadence and the discipline to make sure you do it, because that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. You have to grow the business. Organic growth is absolutely critical. So again, I think that's, again, from the macro picture to kind of our government space. I hope you find some of that kind of useful. I hope I'm not talking too fast. I did have a big cup of coffee this morning. And some of the people who used to work for me, it's like, don't give that guy caffeinated coffee. Give him decaf for sure. So before we kind of open up questions, let's talk about the M&A side of the house. It's a huge market we're in. Large universe of both buyers and sellers, right? And frankly, 15 years ago, there were probably 15 maybe, 10 or 15 private equity firms or financial sponsors, if you will, in our space. Now I think there are 120 private equity-backed companies in our space, probably invested by about 90 different private equity or venture capital firms. So there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of things going on. And so then you've got all of strategic buyers, all the companies around the Beltway, where inorganic growth is absolutely part of the strategy, right? As a public company, capital allocation, you look at, share buyback, you would look at, dividends, you look at capital, you would look at capital expenditure, and there's always a budget for M&A. So it's just, that's the way this business is. And look, I had a good fortune to work for, a very solid private equity firm for about 18 years as a CEO 3 times, Veritas Capital, and worked with Ramsey Masalam, who's been in this space for 25 years. The 3 tours as a CEO, we had 4 great realizations with an MOIC of probably 3.5 for most of them. That's a measurement of invested capital. So learned a lot about the bond market, Wall Street, all those kinds of things. And now working some with Blue Delta Capital is fascinating. Different market, it's minority investment, but it's very interesting. So let me talk about the seller's view, if we can. So they're always GovCon, they're always buyers for these companies, as long as it's a good, solid company, right? And we talk about contract backlog, and you talk about all these kinds of metrics that are important that buyers look at. So I would tell you, if you think about kind of the lessons learned, at least mine from a seller's perspective, I would tell you there are 5 things. Right? The first is focus on building a company that you can be proud of, right? And underneath that is make sure the business decisions you're making are for the long term, right? You don't want to in 2025, you don't want to short sheet and cut business development cost or IRAD, so your profit margins, your EBITDA number goes up. Because you have as many failed processes as you do processes, and you don't want to put yourself in that predicament. So I think, again, it's focus on building the company in the right decisions, because the other thing, too, is when you're selling your company, people are going to look under the hood. I mean, you're selling your house, right? And what happens is if you've got expenditures to the left of where you are, and then to the right, if there's a dip in, if the EBITDA goes up and you're reducing BD, the buyers are going to see that, right? So this is all about common sense. Build a business, run the business like you're going to run it forever. In my view, you'll have the success that you need when you're ready to sell the company. I think migrate to operating systems that are kind of industry standard. Nothing's more frustrating than being a buyer. You go in there and they've got some home-built system that looks at the pipeline, or it looks at the P&L, and you can't discern one from the other. So there's standards, right? I mean, you're trying to sell your business. Don't make it hard on the buyer. So I would tell you standard systems help because it's easier to do in a data room. It's easier to go into to figuring out what the business is all about. And I would also say hire capable advisors, right? And whether it's investment bank or lawyers or finance people, you get what you pay for. And again, you're selling your house. So you want someone that understands the neighborhood, understands what the comps are, that can get you the best price for your business. Right, and I think that's something that I would advocate. And the last thing, and if you hire the right advisors, they're not going to let you put a bunch of junk into your confidential information memorandum, your management presentation, because trust me, as people doing due diligence, whatever you're trying to hide, it'll be found. It's just the way it is. So I think the sellers, and last about a seller, I think is timing is everything, right? And it only takes one buyer. Timing is everything. It only takes one buyer. I think, look, interest rates are going down by the end of 25. It's a really robust market out there. Last couple of years have been kind of slow, but I think you're going to find that there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of activity when you look at all the money that's on the sideline from private equity and the strategic buyers, right? So I think that's something that's important. I think on the buyer side, if you're buying a business, don't fall in love with the company, right? Because you'll lose objectivity, and what you'll find out is you end up helping the seller do their due diligence, whether it's a waterfall or whatever the valuation is, and that's deadly, because a bad deal lasts a long, long time. So I would just tell you, in the due diligence process, if you're on the deal team, one of the things I would advocate too is in the company, make sure that you have your internal team, right? HR, contracts, facilities. Get them involved on the deal team to do the due diligence. For a number of reasons, it's an additional training that you've got. And secondly, once the deal closes, they own it. Whatever they put forth, benefits harmonization, they own it. And again, don't skimp on the advisors is the last thing I'd say. I think the integration plan is critical. It's all about cultural integration, right? You don't want to feel the company being acquired feels less than. You want to put it together, rip the Band-Aid off, integrate it, put it together so everybody's miserable, right? All at once, right? It just works. Otherwise, people retreat back to their corners, and you don't want that. I'd also tell you that in the communication is critical. There's no question about it. I think as the leader, skepticism is okay. Cynicism is not okay. So I think, and then when you close, you got to measure things objectively, and hopefully it works out. I mean, it's not easy work. So again, hopefully from the leading in disruptive times, I think that's kind of where we are. Be thoughtful, people's opinions and their thoughts, and you can't just say, well, that's not relevant. I think our market is great. It's a great market. It's a growing market. I think you need to look at it is regulated, and you need to react accordingly with mission, vision, and values. And the M&A side, look, there are plenty of good advisors out there. It's exciting. Inorganic growth is part of the DNA for all companies. Strategics are looking for companies to buy. Private equity, there's just billions on the sideline. They're looking, and you got a lot of new entrants into this market. And that's why you need to keep things simple. So you got a lot of people who don't know about this market. Keep it simple so people can understand it. I think you're going to see an uptick in the market. There's no question about it. So anyway, I know that's kind of rapid fire. It's 35 years and 14 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. So I'm, Ashish, I don't know if you want, we've got 7 minutes left. We can go to questions. If not, I give you 7 minutes back to your agenda.
No, maybe if you're okay, we can do something.
That's fine, yeah. Hey, Greg, how are you? There's your next panel, Greg Baroni, another icon in the GovCon space.
You're the icon.
No.
Wait, big award last night. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Well, Greg, you brought it up.
One of those lifetime achievement awards.
So, well, thank you. See, Greg, you didn't need to do that. So it was 900 of our closest friends at what year is it, Greg? 22nd Greater Washington GovCon Awards. So anyway, I was picked to get in the Hall of Fame for whatever that means. So I don't get what my son said, well, Dad, you don't get the bus like you get in the NFL, like in Canton. You get a spreadsheet. You get a bronze spreadsheet or something. You get no gold coat. No gold coat. It was a terrible dinner, but other than than the bronze spreadsheet, that's about what you get. So anyway, well, thank you, Greg. So any questions? Mark, yes, sir.
It's your other old friend in the audience here, Matt. Congratulations on last night.
Well, thank you.
Just in terms of lessons learned from some of the acquisitions that you've done, some of them were more successful than others.
No, but they were all successful. What are you talking about? I'm retired now. They were all successful. What do you mean?
Can you explain a little bit about kind of the rinse and repeat recipe that you were able to apply to the different acquisitions that you did, and what you think the most critical success factors were in implementing those?
Yeah, I would say, you heard the question, and it goes back to a lot of what I talked about. Every acquisition is different. There are no cookie cutters that say this is where we're going to integrate. I mean, they're the basic premise, but they're all different. Different cultures, different markets, different locations. So you have to look at them as they're all different. But I think what really works, Mark, to answer your question is, there is a bit of a playbook. You've got to do the diligence, you deal with it. I think the integration is absolutely critical. The things that are constant throughout is you plan for day 1, you plan for day 30, and you plan for day. The worst thing you can do, and I made this mistake, is the big acquisition integrating it, and there were probably 5,000 employees in the company. 1,200 didn't get their paycheck right the first paycheck. An unmitigated disaster. So I think when you say day 1, it is to take care of the people, because when you buy a company, there are 2 questions. The employees say, do I have a job? Do I have benefits? And the customers say, Are you going to change my team? And are my rates going to go up? So I think it is that integration plan. It is choreographing a ballet. I mean, day one, whether you put M&M, and you have offices all over the country, you've got to make sure the message is clear. Day one, here's what we're going to do. Benefits harmonization is absolutely critical. So getting those things done right away for day one is absolutely critical. Zero tolerance for any paychecks get screwed up. Zero tolerance for benefits harmonization. You cannot have that, because that gives those that were bought an excuse to now become a cynic instead of a skeptic. Is that helpful? And you have to follow that up. And it just, so I think that is really, really important. I've just been a big believer in integrating right away, because if not, the culture allows the companies to go back to their corners and behave the way they'd behaved before. So, yeah.
Can I have your insight on accepting investment to exit versus accepting investment to grow a company?
Well, I've been involved in both. It depends on, frankly, it depends on the owner, right? I mean, some will say, I'm going to build a company, and they do it the right way, and they're like, no, I want to sell a business. So, it depends on the market, the timing, and I think the energy, whether it's a founder or whomever it is, if you're saying, I'm done, I don't want to be involved anymore, I would say, if that's the case, you need to articulate that right up front with the bankers and right up front with the potential buyers. The worst thing you can do is equivocate and say, I'm out, and then they'll say, well, we'll buy the company if you're in. You need to know, you need to lay that out to the bankers. Here's what I want to do, and here's the flexibility I've got, right? Because a lot of the new private equity firms coming in don't understand the industry. They're going to want you to roll over equity, right? So you need to be prepared for that. I think a lot of companies that are younger, maybe that have a large component of small business or something that's in the DNA, that taking investment to help grow out of 70% small business contracts to make sure you get full valuation for full and open is important. Change of control, right? Those contracts run off because, the small business, moniker may go away, or may stay. And that's a problem for a buyer to evaluate the value of the business. Does that make sense? But you need to be prepared for that if you're going to sell your business. So if you want to continue to grow it and run it, great. Take some investment if you need it. Put some on the balance sheet, a little money off the table. That's a great way to do it. And then there are others who will say, look, I don't want, some buyout firms won't do that. Veritas Capital is 100% ownership, full buyout. Most of them, I think, Arlington Capital, can't speak for Michael Lusbader, but most of those guys want to own the business 100%. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah.
It's a new balance.
Well, it is. It is, and it's really what you want to do. You and your team own the company, or however, and you get to decide what you want to do. And you may find you may have to say, well, I don't want to do that because if it's all about the valuation, right, and it's all about realization, then you may have to adopt a little bit. The market will tell you. The market will let you know where the best valuation is. You have to decide. So good. That's a high-class problem to have. Right? One last question. I got a minute one. I got 1 minute left. Is that okay? You? Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah.
For CEOs, what's the best way to handle the metastasizing requirements of compliance?
Oh boy. He said it was a good question. So as a CEO, how do you deal with all these, impending regulations and requirements, right? Well, I think they've kind of always been there. There was CMMI, right? The threat of CMMI before CMM. Before there was CMMI, before there was CMMC. So I think what has happened in the market is the government is less ready to put this in your rates. They're saying, no, you got to pay for it. So I think, the organizations, and I was a big advocate of PSC, Professional Services Council, and I've always thought, I've not been involved in a bit, they always did a good job of going up on the hill and basically advocating and say, here's the intended consequence, here's the unintended consequence. And it's going to cost more. So I'm not sure that's a good answer, but it's there. It's always been there. And, I think, the receptivity on the Hill is not quite as what it once was, right? But I think you just have to stand up and jump up and down and say, this doesn't work for us.